I remember the day I built the first office for Riverside Construction from just 2 rooms into a sprawling headquarters in downtown Boston. For 7 years, I poured everything into growing my father's struggling business into a regional powerhouse. The countless nights sleeping at my desk the weekends, sacrificed all because I believed one day Dad would recognize what I had built. I never imagined he would hand it all to my younger brother Ethan, who had contributed nothing but problems. Before I tell you about the biggest shock of my life, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more family betrayal stories like this one. My name is Boyd Rivers, and at 28, I had already transformed my family business from a small local operation into one of the most respected construction companies in Massachusetts. After graduating top of my class with a dual degree in business and construction management, I had offers from major firms across the country. Companies were willing to pay triple what my father could offer, but I chose family. Riverside Construction was my father Harold's dream. He started it 30 years ago, but never managed to grow it beyond a handful of employees taking on modest residential projects. When my mother Angela was diagnosed with cancer 10 years ago, the business nearly collapsed as Dad spent most of his time at the hospital. I was only 18 then, but I would drive straight from college classes to the office to keep things running. Mom was always my biggest supporter. She would tell me, "Boyd, you have the vision to take Riverside places your father never could." After she passed, I promised myself I would make the company successful in her memory. My younger brother Ethan was a different story altogether. 5 years younger than me, he was always the golden child. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, Ethan was praised for simply passing classes. When I worked summers at construction sites learning the trade, Ethan was sent to summer camps and later expensive vacations with friends. He dropped out of college after 3 semesters, claiming it stifled his creativity. Dad never said a word about it, just welcomed him home and gave him an allowance. When I officially joined Riverside after graduation, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Dad had accumulated nearly $300 zero-inches debt, and our client list had shrunk to just 5 regular customers. I immediately sold my car to inject some emergency cash, moved into a tiny apartment to save money, and worked 80-hour weeks. Many nights I slept on the office couch because there was too much to do. My girlfriend at the time left me because she said I was married to the business. She was right. Within 3 years, I had completely turned things around. I developed new business strategies targeting commercial properties instead of just residential work. I built a network of reliable clients, opened 2 new branch offices, and grew our team to 40 loyal employees who respected the company culture I had created. Our annual revenue jumped from barely $500,000 to over $5 million. Dad seemed proud, patting my back at meetings and introducing me as the brains of the operation. I thought all my sacrifices were finally being recognized. The first sign that something was wrong came during a meeting with Callahan Properties, a major commercial developer. I had been courting their business for months, and this meeting was crucial. To my surprise, Dad brought Ethan along, introducing him as also part of the management team. Ethan knew nothing about construction or business negotiations, but sat there nodding as if he understood everything. When the clients asked specific questions about timelines and materials, I answered in detail, while Ethan jumped in with vague statements like, "We can be flexible on that," or "Everything is negotiable." Afterward, I asked Dad why he had brought Ethan. "He needs to learn the business," Dad said casually. "He has natural people skills." Within a month, Ethan had a new title, Deputy Director of Development. He got a corner office and a company car despite having no qualifications or responsibilities. Meanwhile, I was still working 14-hour days managing every aspect of our operations. I tried to include Ethan, assigning him simple tasks that would help him learn. He rarely completed them, often claiming they were boring or not the best use of his talent. When I asked him what he thought his talents were, he said, "The big picture stuff, not the details you get stuck on." The situation deteriorated when Ethan began attending client meetings without me. One client called to ask why we had suddenly changed our payment terms after Ethan promised them extended credit without consulting our finance department. Another complained that Ethan had committed to an impossible deadline. I spent countless hours fixing his mistakes, but Dad brushed off my concerns. "He is learning," Dad would say. "You were not perfect when you started either." The real shock came when I overheard Dad talking with our company lawyer about transferring ownership shares. I pretended I had not heard anything and tried to convince myself I was misinterpreting things. But a week later, at a dinner with his old friends, I heard Dad say I was too rigid and lacked the personal touch, while Ethan knew how to make people feel good. My stomach turned cold. Our employees noticed the shift. Marion, our office manager, who had been with us for 20 years, asked me privately if everything was okay. "The atmosphere has changed," she said. "People are confused about who to report to." Several clients also called me directly, bypassing Ethan after having problematic interactions with him. I finally confronted Dad in his office. "What is happening with Ethan? He is making promises we cannot keep and alienating clients we worked years to secure." Dad leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Boyd, you need to learn to share leadership. You cannot control everything. Ethan brings fresh ideas and energy to the company." "Fresh ideas?" "Like what?" I asked. "He wants to expand into luxury residential development," Dad replied. "He thinks our commercial focus is too limiting." This was exactly the market sector I had strategically moved us away from because the margins were lower and the competition was fiercer. Dad either did not remember or did not care. Perhaps the most painful episode involved the Westfield Corporation contract. I had spent 2 years cultivating a relationship with this major developer, finally convincing them to award us a $10 million contract to build their new office complex. It would be the largest project in our company history. The night we received the confirmation, I bought champagne for the entire staff. Dad seemed genuinely impressed, hugging me and saying, "Your mother would be so proud." 2 days later, he announced that Ethan would be the project lead. "He needs a big project to cut his teeth on," Dad explained, as if this was the most natural decision in the world. When I objected, pointing out that Ethan had zero experience managing any project, let alone one of this magnitude, Dad accused me of not being a team player. Ethan immediately started making changes to the contract terms we had carefully negotiated, offering unnecessary discounts and adding scope without adjusting the budget. I had to secretly work with our project manager to correct these issues before they became contractual problems. Twice I had to call Westfield executives directly to clarify misunderstandings created by Ethan. The stress began affecting my personal life. I started dating Sophie, a landscape architect I met through work. She was understanding about my long hours, but even she became concerned about my health. I was losing weight, not sleeping, constantly anxious about what new disaster Ethan might create. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the world," Sophie told me one night. "This is not sustainable." She was right, but I felt trapped. I had invested 7 years of my life into Riverside. It was not just a job for me. It was my legacy, my tribute to Mom, my future. I could not walk away, but staying was becoming unbearable. The company's 30th anniversary celebration became the tipping point. Dad organized a large party inviting clients, vendors, and employees, past and present. During his speech, he briefly mentioned my contributions, but spent most of the time praising Ethan as the future of Riverside and announcing that Ethan would be taking on a more significant leadership role. I sat there stunned, forcing a smile, while everyone glanced uncomfortably in my direction. That night, I stayed late at the office, trying to make sense of it all. While searching for some contract documents, I discovered financial reports that had been altered. Comparing them with the originals saved in my email, I realized Ethan had been manipulating figures to make his department look more profitable. He had been taking credit for deals I had closed and inflating his contribution to the company's growth. A week after the anniversary party, Dad called me into his office. "I want to talk about the future of the company," he said, gesturing for me to sit. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps he had discovered Ethan's deception. Maybe he had finally seen through the facade and was going to set things right. I could not have been more wrong. "Boyd, you have done great work here, and I will always be grateful," he began, using the past tense, as if my contributions were already behind me. "But as I look toward retirement, I need to make decisions about the company's leadership succession." My throat tightened. "Of course, I have some ideas about that myself." Dad continued, as if I had not spoken. "I have decided to restructure the ownership of Riverside. I am transferring 75% of the company shares to Ethan, while you will receive 15%. I will retain 10% until I fully retire." The room seemed to spin around me. 75% to Ethan. Based on what? What has he done to earn that? Dad's expression hardened. "Ethan has a fresh vision for where this company needs to go. Your approach is too conservative, too traditional. Construction is changing, and we need innovative thinking." "Innovative," I nearly shouted. He has not had a single original idea that was not a disaster. The only reason this company is still standing is because I keep fixing his mistakes. That attitude is exactly the problem," Dad replied coldly. "You think you are the only one who can do things right. Ethan needs room to grow, to make his own decisions. Even when those decisions cost us clients and money, Dad. I found reports he altered. He is taking credit for my work and lying about results." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Small discrepancies that can be corrected. Every young executive makes mistakes." At that moment, the door opened, and Ethan walked in, wearing a self-satisfied smirk. "Sorry, am I interrupting?" he asked, not looking sorry at all. "Not at all," Dad said warmly. "I was just explaining the new ownership structure to Boyd." Ethan nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "I know this might be hard to accept, bro, but change is good. You have been doing things the same way for too long. We need to shake things up." The audacity left me speechless for a moment. "Shake things up? You mean like losing the Anderson account because you promised impossible delivery dates, or like the lawsuit we barely avoided, when you changed material specifications without consulting the engineer?" "See," Ethan said, turning to Dad. "This is why Boyd is not right for leadership. Too focused on problems instead of possibilities." Dad nodded in agreement, as if Ethan had said something profound instead of meaningless corporate jargon. I pulled out printed copies of the original and altered reports. "This is fraud, Ethan. You deliberately changed these numbers to make yourself look better." Ethan barely glanced at them. "Just a different way of presenting the data. You always get hung up on technicalities." Dad took the papers and set them aside without looking at them. "Boyd, I have made my decision. The paperwork is already being processed. You can continue as Chief Operations Officer, but Ethan will be CEO effective next month." I stood up, my hands shaking. 7 years, Dad. I gave this company 7 years of my life. I turned it from a failing business into a success. I passed up job offers that would have paid me twice what I make here. And this is how you repay me. "You were paid a fair salary for your work," Dad replied coldly. "This is not about repayment. It is about what is best for Riverside's future." I looked from him to Ethan and back, finally seeing the truth I had been avoiding for years. This was never about what was best for the company. It was always about him. I pointed at Ethan. "No matter what I achieved, it would never be enough, because he is your favorite. He always has been." Dad's face flushed with anger. "That is enough. You sound like a jealous child. I expected better from you, Boyd. And I expected better from you," I replied quietly, heading for the door. "I will have my decision about whether to stay by tomorrow morning." That night, was the longest of my life. I sat in my apartment staring out the window at the Boston skyline, trying to imagine continuing to work at Riverside under these new conditions. Every scenario ended with the same conclusion: it would destroy me. I would either become bitter and resentful, or I would work myself into exhaustion, trying to save the company from Ethan's incompetence. Around midnight, I called my friend Alex, who worked as CFO for Summit Construction, one of our competitors. We had been classmates in college. If I were to look for opportunities elsewhere, would Summit be interested? I asked after explaining the situation. Boyd, we would hire you in a heartbeat, Alex replied without hesitation. In fact, I know the CEO has always been impressed by what you did with Riverside. Just say the word. By dawn, I had drafted my resignation email. It was professional, unemotional, stating only that I would be leaving to pursue other opportunities and would ensure a smooth transition. I included detailed documentation of all current projects and client relationships. I spent the rest of the night organizing files and writing transition notes for each of my direct reports. At 7:00 a.m., I sent the email to Dad Ethan and our HR manager. Then I drove to the office for one last task. I gathered the 6 employees who had been with me from the beginning, people I trusted completely. I owed them an explanation. I am resigning effective immediately, I told them in the conference room. The company is being transferred primarily to Ethan, and I cannot continue under those circumstances. I saw shock and concern on their faces. I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Each of you has been invaluable to Riverside's success, and I am grateful for your loyalty. Marion, the office manager, spoke first. What will happen to us? That will be up to the new leadership, I replied honestly. I would never ask any of you to leave because of my decision, but I also understand if you explore other options. I hesitated, then added, if you do decide to look elsewhere, you can use me as a reference any time. By 9:00 a.m., I had cleared out my office and handed my company phone and laptop to HR. Dad never appeared, though I knew he was in the building. Ethan showed up briefly, standing in my doorway, with an expression that mixed triumph with uncertainty. You are really leaving? Just like that, he asked. I looked up from the box I was packing. Yes, Ethan. Just like that. Dad thought you were bluffing. He said you would never abandon the company you helped build. I closed the box and picked it up. That shows how little he understands me after all these years. I walked past him, then paused. Good luck, Ethan. You are going to need it. 2 weeks later, I started at Summit Construction as Executive Vice President of Operations. The CEO, Frank Matthews, made it clear from our first meeting that he valued my experience and vision. We have watched what you did at Riverside with admiration, he said. I want you to bring that same energy here, but with the authority and recognition you deserve. My first month was intense, as I learned Summit's systems and culture, but also exhilarating. For the first time in years, my ideas were met with enthusiasm rather than resistance. When I proposed a new approach to project management that had been rejected at Riverside, Frank approved it immediately. Make it happen, he said simply. Within 3 months, 4 of my former Riverside colleagues had joined me at Summit, including Marion and our top project manager, James. It is chaos over there, James told me over lunch. Ethan keeps changing direction every week. The crews do not know what to expect from one day to the next. I tried not to feel satisfaction at this news, but it was difficult. Part of me had hoped that perhaps Ethan would rise to the challenge and prove me wrong. A larger part knew better. The Westfield contract proved to be the first major casualty of my departure. Without me there to manage the relationship and fix Ethan's mistakes, the project quickly went off the rails. 6 weeks after I left, Thomas Westfield himself called me. Boyd, what the hell is happening at Riverside? He demanded. We are weeks behind schedule. They have substituted materials without approval, and your brother just told me we need to increase the budget by 30% because of unforeseen complications. I chose my words. carefully. "Mr. Westfield, I no longer work for Riverside. I cannot speak to their current operations." "Where are you now?" he asked bluntly. "Summit Construction." There was a pause. "Can Summit handle a project of this size?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. A week later, Westfield terminated their contract with Riverside and hired Summit, citing breach of contractual obligations as the reason. It was a huge win for my new company and a devastating blow to my old one. News of Riverside's troubles spread quickly through the industry. Clients became nervous, especially after the Westfield situation. 3 more major accounts followed Westfield to Summit within 2 months. Riverside's stock, which Dad had taken public in a small offering 5 years earlier, dropped nearly 40%. I did not actively poach Riverside clients, but I did not turn them away either. When they called asking about Summit services, I was honest about what we could provide. Most made the switch after a single meeting. Meanwhile, my personal life began to improve as well. Sophie and I had stayed in touch after my resignation, and with my new, more reasonable schedule, we started dating seriously. "You seem like a different person," she told me one evening. "The weight has lifted from your shoulders." She was right. For the first time since Mom died, I felt truly happy. The constant stress and disappointment that had become my normal state at Riverside were gone. I was sleeping better, eating regularly, even finding time for the gym 3 times a week. 8 months after my departure, the business journal that covered the New England construction industry published an article titled "Riverside Construction, a Cautionary Tale of Succession Planning." It detailed the company's rapid decline following the mysterious departure of the executive who had been widely credited with its previous success. Dad and Ethan declined to comment for the story. The numbers told the tale clearly enough. Riverside had lost 60% of its revenue in those 8 months. Their workforce had shrunk from 40 to 15. 2 of their 3 offices had closed. The stock was now trading at just 20% of its value from a year earlier. I did not celebrate this news, but I did feel a sense of validation. What I had built was real, and my absence revealed just how critical my contribution had been. It was not just about my business acumen. It was about the relationships I had cultivated, the trust I had built, the systems I had created. None of those things could be simply handed over to someone else, especially someone like Ethan. Then came the call I had been half expecting. 10 months after I left, Dad reached out. "Boyd," he said, his voice sounding older, tired, "we need to talk." I agreed to meet him for lunch at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. He had aged years in less than 1. His confident posture was gone, replaced by a slight stoop. The arrogance in his eyes had given way to something I had never seen there before: defeat. "The company is in trouble," he said, after ordering coffee. "Serious trouble. We might not make payroll next month." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I have heard. Ethan, he has made some mistakes." Dad stared into his coffee. He was not ready for the responsibility. "I see that now," and I prompted when he fell silent. "And I want you to come back," he said, looking up at me. "We need you, Boyd. The company needs you." In what capacity, I asked already, knowing the answer would not be sufficient. "Senior Vice President. And I would increase your ownership stake to 40%. I almost laughed. After everything, he still could not bring himself to offer me what I had earned. Ethan would remain CEO, still controlling the majority share. I would once again be the person doing all the work while someone else took the credit and made the decisions. "No thank you, Dad," I said quietly. "I have found somewhere I am valued." His face darkened. "So you will just let Riverside fail?" "Your mother's legacy, that stung, but I held firm. Mom's legacy is not a building or a company name. It is the values she taught me, one of which was self-respect." I stood up. "I wish you the best, Dad. I really do, but I cannot save you from this decision." 2 days later, to my surprise, Ethan called. His usual cockiness was gone, replaced by desperation. "Boyd, you have to help us," he pleaded. "The whole thing is falling apart." I did not know it would be this hard. "What did you think running a construction company involved, Ethan?" "I do not know. Not this. Not all these details and problems, and angry clients." His voice broke. "Dad is blaming me for everything." For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my brother. He had been set up to fail by Dad's favoritism as much as I had been set up to be exploited by it. "I am sorry, Ethan, but this is not my problem anymore." After hanging up, I sat for a long time thinking about how quickly everything had unraveled. It had taken me 7 years to build Riverside into a success. It had taken Ethan less than a year to bring it to the brink of collapse. At Summit, meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. After just 2 years, Frank promoted me to Chief Operating Officer. We had doubled our revenue and expanded into 2 new states. The company culture I helped create was recognized in a national business magazine as one of the best places to work in construction. Sophie and I got married in a small ceremony on the coast of Maine. During the reception, she whispered to me, "Do you ever regret leaving Riverside?" I thought about it honestly before answering. I regret that it had to end that way. I regret losing the years I invested. But I do not regret standing up for myself. I do not regret refusing to be devalued. She squeezed my hand. "I am proud of you for that." 3 years to the day after I walked out of Riverside, for the last time, I received news that changed everything again. Dad had suffered a heart attack. He was stable but hospitalized. Riverside was filing for bankruptcy. And Ethan had apparently left the country after accusations of financial impropriety emerged. I sat in my office at Summit, staring at the email from Marion, who had kept in occasional contact. She had not asked for anything directly, but her concern for the remaining employees was clear. 15 people who had stayed loyal to Riverside throughout the decline were about to lose their jobs. After much reflection, I scheduled a meeting with Frank. "I have a proposition," I said. "Riverside Construction is failing. They have good people and some valuable contracts that could be salvaged. I think we should consider acquiring them." Frank leaned back in his chair, studying me. "This is not a purely business recommendation, is it?" "No," I admitted. "But it makes business sense, too. We get their client list, their equipment, and their talent. Plus, their brand still has some value in certain markets." Frank nodded slowly. "Draft a proposal. If the numbers work, we will consider it." The acquisition went through with remarkable speed, given Riverside's desperate situation. We purchased the company for a fraction of what it had been worth when I left. Per my insistence, all remaining employees were offered positions at Summit. We did not maintain Riverside as a separate brand, but folded its operations into our existing structure. A week after the deal closed, I visited Dad in the hospital. He was recovering but looked frail against the white sheets. When I entered the room, his eyes widened in surprise. "You came?" he said simply. "Of course I came. You are still my father." He gestured weakly to the chair beside the bed. "Riverside is now part of Summit," I replied, sitting down. "The employees will keep their jobs." Dad closed his eyes, a tear escaping down his weathered cheek. "I was wrong, Boyd. About everything. About you, about Ethan, about what was best for the company. Yes, you were. I agreed. Not unkindly, but that is in the past now. Can you forgive me?" he asked, opening his eyes to look directly at me. I considered the question carefully. The pain and betrayal I had felt were real, but holding on to those feelings served no purpose now. "I am working on it," I answered honestly. "It will take time." He nodded, accepting this. "And Ethan, have you heard from him?" "No. Last I heard he was in South America somewhere." Dad sighed heavily. "I did him no favors by giving him everything. I see that now. I thought I was showing love, but I was preventing him from becoming his own man." The conversation shifted to Dad's recovery and future plans. Before I left, He asked one more question. Are you happy? Boyd, truly happy. I thought about my position at Summit, my relationship with Sophie, the life we were building together. Yes, Dad, I am. Then some good came from my mistakes after all. In the years that followed, Dad and I rebuilt a relationship different from before, but perhaps healthier. He never returned to Riverside, of course, since it no longer existed as an independent entity. Instead, he focused on his recovery and eventually moved to a smaller home on Cape Cod, where he took up woodworking as a hobby. Ethan eventually returned to the States when the legal issues were resolved with a settlement. He found work at a friend's marketing firm, a role much better suited to his personality and skills. Our relationship remained distant but civil on the rare occasions we crossed paths. As for me, the experience taught me valuable lessons about self-worth recognition and the courage to walk away from toxic situations even when they involve family. Success is not measured by titles or ownership percentages, but by building something meaningful and being valued for your true contribution. I established a scholarship in my mother's name for students pursuing construction management degrees, hoping to inspire the next generation of builders. The first recipient was a young woman whose essay about transforming her family's struggling landscaping business reminded me of my own journey. At a recent industry awards dinner, I received recognition as Construction Executive of the Year. In my acceptance speech, I reflected on the winding path that led me to that moment. Sometimes we build our greatest successes on the foundation of our biggest disappointments, I told the audience. The projects that define us are not always the ones made of concrete and steel, but the ones built from resilience, integrity, and the courage to begin again. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stayed and fought for what was rightfully yours, or would you have walked away like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is not determined by those who fail to see your value, but by your own knowledge of what you bring to the table.